After such a glowing reviews for the newest TFight 305S, I think questions will start popping up. Is it worth spending that much money if the previous one maybe is as good? I think many people kind of skipped, overslept the possibility to test or buy the TFight 305 ISO. TFight is now in the spotlight, and it's worth discussing kinda the road to the newest edition and what were the changes. And if you are following me for a while, then you know ISO won my tournament of rackets. I took a slightly different approach with this tournament of rackets because I was testing frames for probably at least a month. So it was a test of time for the racket. So I guess I am the best person to ask if it's worth buying the newest TFight 305S or the previous ISO version. So let's get into it. Basically, the DNA of the racket is the same, so it's not like one is playing much better than the other. It's mainly playing with the specs, wave distribution, but it plays a big part in the overall verdict. I remember I had a problem picking between TFight 305 and the Prestige Pro. I preferred the wave distribution of the Prestige Pro, but the performance of the ISO TFight 305 was just better. It was just easier to perform well with. More forgiving, more spin potential, but still great control. And this ability to switch from defensive to offensive mode is just very special with the TFight line. It is quite easy to mix up your ball with the TFight line because 18-19 string pattern with a slightly more responsive design, the beam is a bit thicker. It allows you to play like a spin-oriented player or flat hitter, counterpuncher, baseliner. Like you can really explore different play styles with the TFight line, TFight 305 in general. Let's start with the obvious biggest difference, wave distribution, right? TFight 305S is much faster, the swing wave is lower, the balance point is lower, everything else kinda similar, the same. So the impact it had on the performance is mainly feel of the swing, and it can change a lot. Mine TFight 305S came already 3 grams heavier than the listed specs. I added 3 grams to the neck, I added like 3 grams to the top of the racket, and still TFight 305 swings like a heavier racket. It plows through the ball more, and the head is pulling me forward a bit more. But also it is a bit harder to accelerate, right? So from the zero position, just before you start accelerating forward, it takes a bit more effort to start the motion. Here it is much easier, but once you kinda get over the threshold of this, how much effort it takes to accelerate, then it kinda gets more benefits once you get through this threshold, because the throwing motion is a bit easier with something that has a bit more mass at the top. And with the TFight 305S you have to kinda make sure your wrist, your whole body is activated, and your swing must be a bit more deliberate. With TFight 305, once you kinda start the movement, you cross the acceleration threshold, then you can kinda relax your wrist and let the racket go, let the racket fly. The wave distribution will kinda take care of you. With the TFight 305S, you kinda have to make sure to call every action with your wrist. With the TFight 305 ISO, the previous version, the ground strokes were, in my opinion, just better. You get more plow through, it is a bit easier to be locked in and just stay in a rally. But whenever you get a tricky shot, we'll have to kinda analyze the bounce or analyze the pace, or the ball will be a bit slower than you're used to. Kinda those situational balls, it's a bit harder to make adjustments with such wave distribution. So it is a great racket for ground strokes, but not really for those situational balls. TFight 305S is a great solution, but it takes away some of its plow-through, some of its solidness, some of its stability, even some of its comfort, because with lower swing wave there is less force blocking the ball, so the ball kinda have to take over the racket for a while if you don't accelerate enough. That's why I'm kinda trying to meet in the middle, and I think I achieve it because I can kinda relax and just focus on getting to the ball and let the racket do its job, and the racket is fast enough on those situational balls. And yeah, with the TFight 305S I think my shot tolerance got increased. Maybe the quality is a bit worse, but shot tolerance got better. For me as a grinder, it is maybe the most important thing, increasing the floor rather than the ceiling. Of course, I need to think about weapons and how to get more points other than waiting for the mistake from the opponent. So yeah, I kind of made myself a racket that is filling the gap between the old ISO TFight, Prestige Pro and Gravity Pro, because it is similarly stable to the previous ISO similar DNA of the performance. To me, it feels now kind of similar to the Prestige Pro, which I enjoy. I enjoy the way it swings, but I will take the performance of the TFight line. And yeah, Gravity Pro has this connection to the ball, this sense of control coming from a slightly lower powered racket. Because the TFight 305S is starting from a lower spec region of rackets, it is, in my opinion, a bit lower powered. So this gives me a bit better sense of control. I have to accelerate a bit more to get similar power potential to the previous ISO And mainly I am adding mass to find fluidity, a bit more power, but mainly fluidity, because in stock form I had to kinda overheat to achieve similar levels of power compared to the ISO. And I think this swing style is not sustainable in a tournament scenario, because for how long can you swing everything 100%? Especially for a grinder, you are looking for swing speed to force ratio, like how hard it is for you to swing the racket. I am thinking 70% is your happy ground. Whenever you have to go over 70%, something is off and you will start burning energy too fast, in my opinion. Of course, it is very relaxing to kinda hit with almost everything you have and still the ball lands in. But yeah, for tournaments, playing sometimes 2 matches in a row, it would be just too difficult to sustain. And that's why I decided to add some mass, and I'm really happy with it. Some people might ask if it's worth buying under-spec ISO or the newest TFight 305S. And I think the recent release will be a better choice, because the design is slightly supporting more these lower specs. I had 3 TFights ISO and one was slightly under-spec, and to me it kinda ruined the design. And with the balance around 32.5 centimeters, it was just impossible to customize. And with the recent TFight, you still have a chance to modify the racket. If you don't like it in stock form, you still can modify it. Many of you might like it in stock form, depending on quality control, of course. And many of you will probably want to customize the racket. It is possible with TFight 305S. Regarding volleys, I would say still it is dependable on the specs, serves, I will give it to the TFight 305S because it is a faster racket. Returns, I think, again, it depends on the specs. Of course, TFight 305S is a bit faster, previous version a bit more stable, but I think it takes much less tweaking to get the stability enough for competitive play, where the ISO flex was just a bit too much. Current version is a bit better when it comes to this middle ground, finding this perfect middle zone between stability and acceleration, and it gives you options. And for a grinder, having those options is the most important factor when choosing a new racket. When it comes to the comfort, I would say TFight 305 was never a noodle, so don't expect comfort to be on the same page as Prestige or Gravity. It is closer to the Radical and maybe Speed Pro, maybe Pure Aero 98, because yeah, they are kind of dropping some of its comfort to get the performance, to get everything that is possible to get from a performance-oriented racket. That's why I like the TFight 305S and the previous ISOFlex, because it was giving me huge toolbox to work with for competitive environment. When it comes to the touch and feel, because it is slightly associated with comfort, I would say it is very close to the ISOFlex, and it is mainly impacted through the wave distribution, I would say. With the underspec ISOFlex that I had, and I sold eventually, I had kind of similar touch and feel to the 305S, but yet 305S is giving me now a bit more stability and a bit more personality compared to the underspec ISOFlex. It is a bit easier to manipulate the head with the 305S, therefore I'm giving a slight edge in touch and feel to the TFight 305S. So yeah, basically my call is that it is worth buying the newest TFight 305S. It is giving you some room for customization. I do prefer to buy a racket and getting the whole package, like pick and play, and ISOFlex shines here, I must admit. But for someone coming from a more headlight and heavy racket, I think this one is slightly easier to switch over to, where the TFight ISOFlex is a very specific racket, and whenever I was kinda switching between my top 5 frames, I felt the difference in wave distribution. There is not that many rackets that swing the same ways. It will be harder for everybody coming from different brands to switch over to the ISOFlex. That's why I think Tecnifibre decided to change the wave distribution and make it more accessible to wider group of people, to sell more rackets and to make people happy, because it is easier to play with this version. I just think that they went a bit too far because yeah, you have to customize it, and yeah, they are defending their choice with saying that people now play with more powerful rackets, faster rackets, but usually it is associated with a 16-19 string pattern, 18-19, 18-20. People kind of still stick to the old school specs. I believe that with a slightly more closed patterns, you kind of need heavier racket. They could maybe increase the static wave by 5 grams, maybe swing wave by 2-3 points. Small tweaks that you can do on your own, but yeah, it will be closer to a whole package racket. But yeah, the conclusion is that I think this one is better. It is a bit easier to play with, and it has room for customization. It has similar DNA. Most TFight ISOFlex users will be happy with this addition, with the only exception if the player is coming from those type of rackets with this specific wave distribution closer to the ISOFlex, he will not be happy with the TFight 305S. Maybe if he customizes the racket, but still the static wave will be higher. So it will be a tricky one for him. Me myself, I am coming from the heavier rackets but more headlights, so I actually don't mind bumping up the static weight even by 15 grams in this case. But I will try to keep in mind this philosophy of lighter rackets. Maybe I will get closer to 340 grams total. Now I am 345. Great racket, I might be switching to it as my main racket. Of course, ISOFlex won my tournament of racket, so therefore this has a pole position. I am testing Whiteout V2. I will be testing Radical Pro, ISO 98, Diadem Axis 98, and I think that's gonna be it. I will update my top 5 frames. I also forget about the Babolat Pure Aero 98. I will also review it. I got myself one and I will customize it a bit more to my specs. So yeah, let's see which racket will be my main racket for 2025. Thank you guys for watching and see you soon. Bye bye.